Well, today I thought what I would do as an agenda is first, well, not first, but I wanted to go over. There's been a lot going on with the Tanzu Application Platform. There's a beta 4 of it out right now. And I noticed there's a lot of videos that we have. What do you have in your mouth? There's a lot of videos that we have out. So I wanted to review them. But before we did that, my daughter is doing school from home today. So I thought she should join us. And her suggested topic to start off with is.
Top 10 things you should know about cats.
All right, so let's start. Do you want to go from 1 to 10 or 10 to 1?
1 to 10.
Okay. So let's start with the number one thing that you should know about cats.
Number 1. Cats have sharp claws. See, when you're a baby kitty, you have really sharp claws. But when you grow up,
Yes.
the older cats don't have that much of sharp claws.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mommy, I always wanted a baby cat, but Mommy told me baby cats have more sharper claws than grown ups.
Oh, I see. Okay, number 2.
Number 2, eyes. So a kitty baby. So a cat of a baby.
A baby cat.
A baby cat. In their eyes, of their color, they're squares.
Yeah.
But when you grow up, they're circles.
Huh.
Or sometimes if they hear something, they.
Okay, got it. Okay. Number 3.
And number 3,
Things you should know about cats.
they can jump really high.
Whoa, that's true. Number 4.
They're fierce and
Opinionated?
opinionated.
Like what makes you think what's something that a cat's done that is fierce?
Pounce on me.
Uh-oh, getting a bunch of pear juice on me.
Ew.
That's how it goes with the baby. You
That's
get
the life of having
Lots-
That's the life of having 3 kids with this guy.
Yeah, lots of fluids. Okay, oh, come on, I was gonna eat that. Number 4.
Number 4. There's all different kinds of cats. I'm going to save the last different kind of cat for last.
Okay.
Wait, so we didn't.
I think we're on 5 now, right? Or are we on 5? Let's just assume we're on number 5.
No, we're. Oh.
What's the number 5 thing?
No.
Okay. So if you're just joining, we're doing top 10 things you should know about cats before we check in and see what's been going on with the Tanzu Application Platform. So,
Okay.
number 5 thing.
There's all kinds of different cats.
Uh-huh.
And the one I personally don't like, and I'm going to save the last 4. But I think some of you people might know the cat I'm talking about. I'll save for last. That one I don't like. So, there's multi-kind of color cats.
Uh-huh.
There is a white, black, orange cat of multicolors.
Yeah.
Black cat, gray cat,
Cat.
multicolor cat. Okay, number 6.
Uh-huh.
Cats are cuddly and cute, and my parents will never let me get one.
No, because we already have a dog. We already got something. Okay, number 7.
Number 7.
Or get up there on the microphone just in case. Just get a little closer.
I think I'm close enough.
Okay, so number 7.
Number 7. Cats are afraid of dogs.
Okay.
See, I didn't know, like, when I was 4, cats were afraid of dogs.
Number 8.
No. So the reason why cats are afraid of dogs is because dogs are more aggressive than cats, and they bark, and cats are like.
That's good. Okay, number 8.
Number 8. All different kinds of things, but all different kinds of animals. A lion is kind of like a cat. A cheetah, a jaguar, a black cat.
And number 10.
Number 10. No, wait. Where are the number 8?
Number 8 was, I forget what 8 was.
No, number 8 was like a lion and a cat, a jaguar, a black. Yeah. Number 8 was that.
Yeah.
So, number 9. Number 9 is cats can easily get. Number 9 is cats can easily get distracted.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And number 10?
Number 10. I'm saving the best for last. Number 10
I'm ready.
is the most exclusive, most horrifying cat. It's a naked cat. That's the most hideous cat ever.
Number 10, there are cats that are naked.
No, really, those are the hideous cats ever.
Yeah.
The cats that don't have fur. They're so hideous.
Ah. I see. Okay, well, that was good. That was 10 things you should know about cats by
10 things
Alejandro.
you should know about my sister.
Oh, yeah. She's reading some good literature there, as you can see. She liked hearing about cats. All right, well, I'm going to go get these girls set up for the rest of their day, and then...
Wait, hold on, Daddy.
Uh-huh. And then I'm going to be back, and we're going to go over some of the stuff that's... just kind of get updated on what's been happening with the Tanzu Application Platform. So enjoy some eating Nutella videos. All right, that was great.
I love the part of it when I go. Oh wait, do I remember that?
I do. All right, let's get going. We need to record some new ones of those, huh? All right.
Hi guys, I'm going to start doing it right now. I spread it on here. And after I'm going to spread this on it, I'm going to lick the knife off. I don't know if it will be good, but let's see. I'm going to eat it right now. It's really good. Bye. I'm going to spread this on it. I'm going to lick the knife off. I don't know if it will be good. Let's see. I'm going to eat it right now. It's really good. Bye.
All right. Now we're back. I hope you enjoyed top 10 things to know about cats and little Nutella videos. So now I can get back to the actual, actual video stuff. Let me fix up the green screen. You know, you gotta have that, right? I also got myself a snack of some anchovies and cheese and crackers. Pretty exciting stuff going on here. Well, so like I said, I thought it would be good. There has been a lot of stuff going on in the past month or so with the Tanzu Application Platform. Now, the Tanzu Application Platform is basically it's basically the work that we're doing to start off with any Kubernetes distro running wherever, and add in a lot of tooling around it and a lot of support for operations stuff, but mainly focused on making Kubernetes a really good place for developers to work, adding in stuff that's helpful for them, kind of removing the need for them to understand the internals of Kubernetes and how to configure it. But also, there's a certain enterprise developer sort of set of capabilities that gets you, and that's really around having a lot of the kind of governance and enterprise architecture, and a lot of the kind of things that you need when you're doing, when you're managing hundreds, if not thousands of applications and thousands of developers working somewhere, right? I think this is as you know, if you watch me talk, this is the kind of context that I'm always interested in more than not. How do large organizations that do software manage to do it well? So I thought what we would do, let me come over here. You can see my notes. So first, I thought we would check in on several of the videos that are there, that are kind of updates about what's going on. We actually just released the beta 4, so we can go over the notes for it. But let's start. I want to start with this one about what these are, and then you'll see the same person kind of went through and went over the betas that are available. So let's load this person thing up. Let me just make sure the sound is coming through.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a public sector solutions engineer here at VMware Tanzu.
Yep.
And today I want to do a quick run through of the installation and getting started process with the Tanzu Application Platform.
So let's go into
To frame the conversation, we're going to look at the difficulties some may experience in getting started with Kubernetes, and then we're going to look at how the Tanzu Application
some
Platform
framing,
hopes
good.
to solve that for operators and developers alike.
We'll get an overview. Let me turn this up.
If I were getting started on my Kubernetes journey today, I might go to the CNCF's landscape and look at all the various tools and platforms that I might be able to use and stitch together to create the environment that I want. Similarly, I might go to the continuous delivery landscape and pick out the tools that I want there for my path to production. We see already that there's already tons of power, tons of options, but also an overwhelming amount of choice for those that want to get started. So I want the ability to actually opt into the things that I find the most useful, but I want to have sane and logical defaults that make it so it's easy for me to get up and started.
So that is, you know, when you're developing a new idea like we are in Tanzu land, you often come up with a lot of, you've got to come up with like new concepts and words. And, you know, I do this. I think it's easy to get caught up in kind of, I'm trying to word this in a precise way, but kind of overly floored ways, because jargon of describing things, because jargon is important. It's anytime you see a piece of jargon, typically in whatever context it's in, it means something incredibly precise, like you're packing a lot of definition and nuance and focus into a phrase, right? So if someone, for example, says secure software supply chain, they mean something a lot more detailed than just a build process or release management, right? So that's why you hear that kind of thing. And then the work that we've been doing in the Tanzu Application Platform abounds with these kind of phrases, right? This kind of jargon in a good way. But Alex there just went over kind of a core concept of what it does in very plain speak, which is like, it's a bunch of templates, right? Now, the reason we don't often say that is because, you know, then you have to spend a lot of time talking about how it's not just templates. But what it does is it provides a lot of defaults and templates for developers who are going to be running their apps on Kubernetes, and even setting up what the applications look like. And then the important layer on top of this for that governance is that whoever you is, whether it's an enterprise architect, a security person, an operations person, whatever, they can create those templates as well, specific for their organization. And then you have the supporting catalog to look up what these templates are. And you can start to see how what you can do with the Tanzu Application Platform is kind of build up similar, that if you went to a public cloud or you went to a catalog of software, you have all these different options, and you can build up what that portal is an old word, but I don't know what else to call it, that catalog of enterprise stuff you can do. And, you know, if you've used Cloud Foundry, the Tanzu application service, you know how you can go in with tiles, as they're called, and you can select services, or if you're familiar with Heroku, where you've got dynamos. But this is a fundamental part of a platform as a service, is that you have all these predefined things that are really easy for developers to not only find, but also install and get running, but also to do in a compliant way that fits within the context of their organization. So keep that in mind. A lot of what we're talking about is just, as I'm putting in air quotes, defaults and templates, but it's also not just that. It's like building up the catalog of services that developers can use with all the different concerns that people might have. So let's keep going.
Sector customers might say, hey, well, Amazon, how do you solve this? How do you want me to build a software factory on top of Kubernetes? And we can see that even with Amazon, there's an 11-step main process that you follow to configure their recommended platform, followed by a number of prerequisites, followed by steps for the steps to get started. Now, that's not shade at Amazon. Even today, you'll see that there's some configuration that we had to do to get started on the Tanzu application platform. But the idea here being we want to minimize that amount of configuration for folks to get started while still giving them the underlying power that is an open Kubernetes. So let's look. For today's demonstration, we're going to look at the Tanzu application platform running on the Tanzu Community Edition on top of Amazon infrastructure.
Oh, look. He's using, I don't know how to say it, Exceladraw. It's kind of a fun new platform that gives you like faux whiteboarding. Let's see how he uses that too.
Sure. Doesn't really matter how you configure this. It could be Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. It could be EKS. Whatever Kubernetes that you want to bring to the table, you give it that and you say you install the Tanzu application platform on top of that. For today's demonstration, I've already installed the Tanzu CLI locally, and I've installed the Carvel tooling on top of the Tanzu Application Platform. That's going to be the workhorse behind a lot of the reconciliation loops we see in how the Tanzu Application Platform gets installed. To get started, I've already created a namespace that we want to install, and I've added the secrets to actually connect to the Tanzu repository where we'll get these packages from. So we can see that I've already created the connection, which is great and very simple. And we can see that there are a number of packages that we could choose to install. Frankly, when I see this list as it prints out, I feel like I'm back at the CNCF landscape. There's so many options. How do I get started? What are the right options for me? How do I make that decision? Here's where profiles come in. Profiles are a concept within the Tanzu Application Platform where we can create sane starting points for a number of types of personas to actually get the right tools that they need to get up and running with the Tanzu Application Platform.
So there you go. I mean, you're kind of inching into one of the major points of the Tanzu Application Platform. He's being very good at not calling it TAP, as internally we would call it. But so you've got Kubernetes set up, and then you've layered on top this defaults selection of services that you'll have, of functionality. There's also things like the Tanzu build service of just like stuff that you'll have. So what you're really getting at here is you have a toolkit for building a platform as a service on top of Kubernetes, or as Kelsey Hightower famously put it, for building a platform on a platform, right? Which is essentially what Kubernetes is. And that, you know, until you have that platform built on top of it, you're not really getting the benefits of Kubernetes, right? You're inflicting it onto your developers to build their own stuff on top of it. But you're introducing something even worse, which is you're going to have multiple developers, multiple development teams building multiple types of platforms, doing things in multiple types of ways. And this is, you know, to use the old saying about regex, now you have two problems. You have the problem of dealing with, you know, I don't know, complexity of your infrastructure layer, and now you've got you got more than two problems. You have to maintain all of that other stuff around it. So that's why in a large organization, it's really important that you take the time to build out a platform as a service based on Kubernetes, or a platform on the platform. I always think maybe the phrase PaaS isn't popular anymore, which I think is really not helpful. I think it's a totally good term that means quite a bit, but people are just dismissive of it because of lock-in and a bunch of nonsense like that. Like as a concept, it's perfectly fine, but maybe because it has such bad feelings around it and thinking we do need to say just platform, which is fine. But let's go on to see how, you know, what this video is about is how you narrow down to an even more focused view. So you might have, I'm guessing, maybe a profile for like Java developers, or a profile for data scientists. I don't know. We'll see if that fits to what I'm thinking.
For the sake of this demo, I've actually chosen the full profile, and I've already completed the install. But if we were to run it again, it would be as simple as a single line. I can't say that enough. I love it. One line, and it installs all of the components with one single config file.
He loves it.
Boom, in place. It's really great. I'm super excited for it. So let's look at what was installed after we ran this install command. We can see that there is going to be a list of all of the packages that we saw before because we chose the full installation and we're ready to get going. Which leads us to the next section. Well, how would a developer get started with this installed platform?
Now, what we haven't done great in these demos, which is fine. It's not GA yet, and they've been working. No, as he said, shade against that. But well, you have to bring to your imagination of those lists of services. Let's see if I can bring that visual up. He does a good job of clearing a screen. But you have to imagine that within your organization, you see custom things to your organization in here, right? Because a lot of this is a confusing thing about like Kubernetes-based things, is it's, I don't know, a fractal. Recursive is a better thing, is that a lot of these things run in Kubernetes. So they are Kubernetes services. Here's my ignorance. I need to learn this better pretty soon here. But, you know, there's CRDs that you've installed. I think that's right. So you start to get into this confusion loop where you have to separate out. You've got the same thing, your same cluster or whatever, where your tools for doing software in that cluster are running in the cluster, but then the software, the actual apps that you're running, are also running in that cluster. And it starts to mix things together a little too much, right? So That's why you see things you use to build software potentially mixed with the software. And then you've also got like your management cluster versus your whatever cluster. That way, we as a community need to just like sort out that confusion. It's unhelpful, in my opinion. But imagine what you would see here is, let's say you were a bank and you're doing your retail banking thing. You might also see a service in here that's sort of like, customer lookup or ledger lookup, or something even more simple. Let's say you have a service that looks up the location of an ATM or a store, and that's a something that you've got written in there. Like maybe that's a service that shows up that you can install the interface for and start to interact with, or maybe not. Maybe you do that in some totally different style of doing things. But imagine that all of the various sort of pieces of custom functionality you would have in your Kubernetes thing could be listed as a service here and be set up for someone to use, like a database or all sorts of stuff like that. And then again, that allows you to make sure that you're securing and you're adding the governance and everything around it that you would need.
Which leads us to the next section. Well, how would a developer get started with this installed platform? We could create a namespace for them. We would need to add a secret for their registry, be that different than wherever the operators are storing stuff. And in this case, I've actually already configured a domain within Amazon because I want to have pretty URLs. So if I were to get started now, after running that single command to get started,
Who doesn't want pretty URL?
I would run yet another single command to create a workload on the platform. I have configured it to use the just plain out of the box supply chain. There are multiple that come with the Tanzu Application Platform. This one is just going to compile my code into a container and then actually run it so it's exposed and accessible. So in this case, I'm actually going to say no because I've already created a workload. But
So let's look here. You can learn with me. I don't know what Carto. Let's look up what Carto run is. Is that an actual? Oh no! Did I mess it up?
Run it again. It would be as simple, wherever the operators are. I have configured it to use the just plain out of the box.
Sorry about that. Let's see if this is an actual domain name. Hey, there you go. So this is a reference to cartographer stuff, right? Now, cartographer, I need to understand it a little better to kind of go over it, because man, this is another thing in the Kubernetes world that you start to get to layers of abstraction and like unintentional obfuscation for awesomeness that get really confusing. And you've got to kind of understand a lot of the context of what's going on here. And cartographer is like dangerously close to that in needing to kind of like understand what it's doing. It's one of those things where like I found in my programming experience that of course you have a layered approach to doing software, so you don't have to reinvent everything. But the more and more layers you have, and the more desire you have to have each layer ignorant of what's happening underneath it or above it, the more decoupled they are. Like you got to do all that coupling in your wetware in your brain, and it can be kind of difficult. Like anyways, but. Like I think I almost understand, thanks to my coworker Cora, what's going on here, and it is pretty nice once you kind of get the deal with it. So I'll have to go over that at some point. But let's see. So he's setting up. He's basically creating a cartographer supply chain, as they call it, and he's saying that so the labels, he's got to hook it up to a repo somewhere. Yeah, so he's got a repo. And it's basically like, so if you were to go here, you would see he's got like a Hello World app or whatever. So he's saying that I want to make a step in this supply chain, which just think of it as a release management, a build thing, whatever. Again, with the jargon, that means something very precise, right? Like he's saying, this is the source code I want you to pull, and I want you to like build it. And when you put it in this namespace, right? So it could be whatever namespace for your cluster, and give it this name. And then I'm not sure where he does the URL for it. Let's figure that out. So basically, he's saying, go to get this thing, probably compile it. I'm unclear. It depends on how you configure stuff. This is probably if you go get this, it'll tell you itself if it wants to be compiled or not. This is where the application awareness comes in. The same thing that you would see with build packs and cloud native build packs in on their own, but also in Cloud Foundry, where an application self-describes how to build it, and it relies on the platform to do that for it. To say it says how to build it, it says what type of application it is, and the platform, whether it's Cloud Foundry or something like the Tanzu Application Platform, it builds it in its own preferred way of doing things. It takes over control of building it, which is where a lot of governance and security stuff comes into play. So let's see what happens next.
Supply chain. There are multiple that come with the Tanzu Application Platform. This one is just going to compile my code into a container and then actually run it so it's exposed and accessible.
There you go.
So in this case, I'm actually going to
it's gonna get the source
because
and
I've
compile
already
it.
created a workload. But you can see that this is just a 13-line workload file that an application developer would have to plop in. Let's look at the application that I ran before this. Hey, look, it's already done and ready. If I go to the website, it might take a moment because Cloud Native Runtime says, hey, you weren't using that. I'm going to spin it down. And once it loads, we'll see, voila, it's up and running. I mean, so amazing. Like,
I see. So the way he set up the URL or the route or whatever is, so there's a convention. And this is another one of those things where, like, you know, it may be a 13-line YAML page, but there's probably, well, hopefully, there's also some wiki pages or Confluence. There's some documentation that goes over the norms or the defaults, right? And, you know, as an old school static typing Java app developer way back in the 2000s, like when dynamic languages, as we called it then, like Ruby came along, they were so confusing and frustrating. Because, of course, the Ruby people, and you see this in Spring Boot, they would be like, I can do all this in 3 lines of code. But that 3 lines of code required knowledge of, like, the 80 lines of code that were missing, right? Like, and I see this nowadays in a lot of coding where it's just like, I just add this 1 line of code and I've got a full mobile app and a social network. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic. But essentially what you're doing is all of that stuff is pre-written for you, defaults and templates. But you do need to know the convention. For example, that if we name this in the cartographer file here, Tanzu Java Web App 2, you have to know that what that means is that you're going to create, that's a subdomain, right? I'm really bad at that kind of stuff. But the URL that you're going to get, the route that's going to be set up is going to be the subdomain. There you go. And then your Kubernetes cluster, the namespace, I'm sorry. And then prefixed to whatever your domain was, right? And presumably this is set up in some other YAML file somewhere, right? But his point of, like, that you only have to use these 13 lines is that all of that is established for the developer. They don't need to, so quote unquote, invent the universe, right? There's that old Carl Sagan joke that, you know, to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe, which is fun. And so that's a lot of what's going on here is, like, we're trying to make it so you only have to invent the universe once for your thousands of developers and applications. But you do need to document what the norms are and how things work. So let's go back.
this is the experience that we think the developers and operators alike will want when they get started. From single line install to single line, let me get in and start running. Because right now I've done one line to get us up and running, and I've done one line to get that code out. And now I can push a commit to this repo on GitHub, and I'll automatically see those changes being made in my environment. I'm so excited. We hope you are too. Please let us know if you have any feedback. We look forward to seeing you out there. Thanks.
So let's get this logo. Boom. So you can see, I should have brought some water, but you can see that what we're trying to do with the Tanzu Application Platform is give you the tools you need to have that platform that you built out of your platform. So I'll put this video in the chat if you're watching the replay. And if you're watching the archive on YouTube, which chances are you are, I'll put all these links below so that you can click on them as well. So now let's go over to, I think that established a pretty good overview of, well, not pretty good, good enough for our purposes. But let's go check out the overview of what's in beta 3 as things are built out. It's our buddy again.
Hi, my name's Alex. Today I want to talk to you about the Tanzu Application Platform Beta 3 release. And we're going to start right where we left off last time with the Beta 2 release. So if you
I should have gotten to that one.
Or you're not.
Hold on. We better go find the Beta 2 release, because he's told me that we need to watch it. And you know, if there's one thing people know is that I do what my coworkers recommend. I don't know if that's true at all. So where is that? Is this? No. Oh, we should really go in and link those videos up in there. But you know, I don't want to tell people how to live their life. I don't really want to, but I might end up doing it. So where is... So if I search for beta 2. Aha! Wait a second.
Engineer, and I want to do a very quick lightning talk.
Well, where is beta 1? Beta. Like that Buck Rogers guy. Let's see. Beta. Not to be confused with Joe Beta. I'm sure he's never heard that joke before. Yeah. Okay, let's search for Alex. Oh boy. That's not getting us anywhere. So we'll just pretend. We don't tell Alex that we didn't start with the previous one, and we will go ahead and start here.
Engineer, and I want to do a very quick lightning talk around the Tanzu Application Platform beta 2. So again, beta software here. Let's first talk about what the domain is that the Tanzu Application Platform operates in, and that's around easing developer, operator, and security concerns of delivering applications from first line of code all the way to running in.
Wow, he really that's around. Let's listen to that again.
Concerns of delivering applications from.
Hold on.
Application Platform operates in, and that's around easing developer, operator, and security concerns of delivering applications from first line of code all the way to running in production on Kubernetes.
There you go. So basically, I think people will probably end up calling this a combination. We would call it platform operations. He said developer operations, which is another good phrase. Or you could call it site reliability engineering. Some people might call it DevOps engineers, although I'm starting to get the sense that DevOps engineer means people who do your build chain nowadays. We'll see. Hopefully the DevOps people will evolve that. But basically, it's the people who write and maintain the platform, the tools and the services that your application developers use, run their stuff on top of. That is what the Tanzu that is the customer of the Tanzu Application Platform, in addition to your security people, right? Again, the point is to give you the toolkit you need to build a platform on top of Kubernetes for application developers.
So let's look at each of these layers a little bit deeper and see where that takes us. So if we start with the...
Oh, my daughters are back. Did you want to contribute anything?
No.
No. Hey, will you bring me a bottle of water? Ask mommy to put together like a camping bottle of water for me.
Why do you need a bottle of water?
Because I'm thirsty. I ate a bunch of salty stuff.
Fine.
All right. Thank you. We'll see if that works. All right. Let's go back to this. So this is a point, if you watch the Tanzu Tuesday from this week, or maybe it was last week, there was, I don't remember people's names well. I forget the dude's name, but he was going over how Backstage, which is a project from Spotify, is being used in the Tanzu Application Platform as kind of like the, I don't know, the Portal frame kit. You can tell that I lasted development in the 2000s, right? Because I use words like Portal, but it's basically the generic portal making kit and thing for Kubernetes. It's a terrible description, but whatever. There's also a good TGIK with, speaking of betas, with Joe Beta going over Backstage, where he's kind of learning it from May or March, which is fun to watch. He's like, "Oh, Node," which I think is a reaction I hear many people have. It's good stuff. There's actually a nice conversation in there, one that I try to have a lot, where he distinguishes between, I don't know what to call them. They're not really systems developers, but platform developers, Kubernetes developers, and application developers, right? I think there's a lot of work to be done of those two parties to understand each other. Anyhow, what's mentioned in that overview of Backstage from Tanzu Tuesday is that a lot of what people hear that is nice about what's going on here is that inside of a large organization, an enterprise, if you will, just discovering what is available, right? Whether it's APIs, the tools that you can use can be very difficult, and not let alone discovering how to use it. Thank you. Do you want to say anything?
When you dating, I like to eat wieners.
Yeah, I do like hot dogs. That's true. Anyways, but that discoverability, looking at the catalogs and finding the services to use. And I think, I mean, I have never is a strong word, but I have very rarely encountered a corporate intranet that is as good as the public internet for finding things. And I think you can imagine that as a developer, it's an even more obscure in the company of a large, 100,000 person company or whatever. It's an even smaller part of the internal intranet for them to go search and just find stuff, right? It's really hard to find what are databases we have set up to use, the practices, the norms. So that's the portal, if you will. Sorry, I keep using that word, but the benefit that you get with the Tanzu Application Platform is you start to consolidate all that stuff down somewhere so that it's easier to discover and find, which I think is a little appreciated but extremely valuable feature. There you go. So this is the thing, the word we use for defaults and templates that are customizable, etc., is accelerator. And again, if you were to get one of the Tanzu Application Platform people on here, they would add a lot to say why we choose, anyways, to add all the nuance to it, which is fantastic. There we go. They call it a portal, so I'm not just an old guy.
Supply chain that we
apologize.
can
She's just
iterate
watching my
into,
big
and we
head.
kind of know what data is out there that we might be able to consume or need services we might need to integrate with. So let's move to the next part of the flow. It's a little bit wider window of iterating and debugging. So when we look at this, we start to think, developers are like, hey, I want to actually write code. I want to get going. And the concerns that they might have in this domain are around like, hey, my app works locally, but like, how do I know that it's going to work in Kubernetes? Like those aren't always one-to-one. Frankly, they almost never are. And then like, say I do actually push my application to be that like a staging environment or wherever prod, how will I know if my application is actually running well? How can I see logs, metrics, etc.? So things that we have that operate in this domain as a part of the Tanzu Application Platform. In the iterate space, we really see our...
Now, this is coming on to, I think, an interesting notion for whatever this tool is. Let's call it the Tanzu Application Platform, for the layer that developers interact with on top of Kubernetes. And that is not only, that is basically that you have some runtime connection or production connection. So not only do you have, can you discover the catalog of stuff that you can use, tools and services and stuff, and not only can you build them, as we saw in the previous one, right, using Cartographer underneath them to kind of, in just 13 lines of YAML code, as long as you understand the conventions and those have been established. My daughter's back for some editorial. Here, let's bring her in. So not only can you do that building and hook it into your build chain, but you also, once the code is running in Kubernetes, you can start to observe it and look at it, and even get what I would call some developer level kind of metric stuff in there, right? I mean, I think it's a terrible idea to have your developers fully manage their applications in production. I've been trying to track this down, but I remember my old buddy Andrew Schaefer. He had a great slide in a presentation or point once where Werner Vogels in the late 2000s said, you build it, you run it, or something like that. But I think what's not appreciated about that is what Vogels also meant, and I still need to verify this, but I think this has become the case, is that like, as long as you have a very extensive platform underneath that does a lot of stuff for you, right? I mean, developers don't want to it doesn't make sense for them to run everything down to the dirt. So you need that platform for them to have. So what you start to see that the Tanzu Application Platform also gives you is in that same portal. So you've built an application, a version of it. It is cognizant of what it is, where it's deployed. It's what we used to call a configuration management database, a CMDB, which is always what you want, knowledge of what the state, the reality of production is. But it's also running so the developers can go in and look at and analyze their code and see what's there. And then other people can go there, right? So you get this production view all in the same place and hooked up with each other. And just as with the idealized state of a CMDB, it's basically enriching your runtime view of everything. So let's go back.
Integration with developer conventions and Tanzu dev tools for VS Code. You don't have to use this flow, but as an option, you can get a fast feedback loop of actually live debugging on Kubernetes clusters in your own like local dev environment. So this is a very nice convention to allow developers to not have to have entire Kubernetes infrastructures locally. While they could use, for example, Tanzu Community Edition to solve that problem, they don't have to. They could point at running clusters. It all depends on the workflow that works for you. And developer conventions enables.
Oh no, they gave me sparkling water.
If we look at the debug section, we start to see application live view coming in. And application live view is a tool. Really, it's an app.
I mean, I'm still going to drink it, but still,
an app with like surrounding connectors that allows your developers to have their applications effectively like auto wired, to use springy terms, into an app that shows things like metrics.
So this is like the developer level production view stuff that they would have, which again, like having this all integrated together in one thing is like great for maybe any developer, but especially enterprise developers that are working in large organizations with decades worth of code, all sorts of other people to coordinate, so forth and so on.
HTTP requests, memory consumption. It's not a full observability tool like Tanzu Observability, but it does get you a decent amount of the way there. So let's keep going because we're running out of time fast. So next in the flow, we have test and build, scan, sign, and store and deploy. And this is all about like, hey, how do I get like my code built into a container, assuming my test passed? Security starts to hop in and be like, hey, I don't want you just deploying anything. What are you doing over there? And then lastly, like, how is my application actually going to be deployed? And the backbone to all of this is our
see, they skipped to the production thing before the build thing. So, it would be kind of confusing. Maybe if you wanted to have the maximal thing, I would say at this stage, you're instrumenting. I don't know if the kids still use that term, but you're doing all the stuff to your application so it is manageable in production. Or you could just skip over that totally and then put the live view thing at the end, right? Once it's in production, and just note that this phase had also instrumented it and auto-wired it together. But whatever, just a minor note.
Supply chain choreographer. And supply chain choreographer is built on top of open source cartographer, and it's a tool that we use to construct Kubernetes native supply chains. The beauty of these supply chains is that you can integrate with any tooling that you want that builds the connection back into supply chain choreographer. And it does, as the name states, it choreographs a flow to wherever the end of that supply chain is. For example, we actually ship with 2 default supply chains that.
There's another piece of fun jargon that we like to use around here is choreograph versus build versus whatever. I don't know. Again, they're very great distinction between them that are useful if you need that nuance, but it's just a build and a release management, just CI/CD. And when you're trying to figure it out, I wouldn't get too wrapped up in the definition of that. It's good to know how a tool works, and then you can understand You know, I mean, think about hammers. You've got that hammer that has the nail puller on the end of it, which I think, you know, much like my position on the flathead screwdriver, it should not exist. There's no reason for it to exist. You should only have the Phillips head screwdriver. It's all these different types of screws. It's just a waste of resources. We got a lot of stuff we can worry about in civilization, and having multiple types of screws is ridiculous. Just have a Phillips head screw, we'll be done. But you know, as with the hammer, right? Then you got that other hammer that's got like a hammer on one end and the really narrow hammer on the other end. Like, I don't even know what that's for. But once you know how a hammer works and you have experience with it, then you can get into the esoterica of all the different types of hammers and, you know, see what it means. But just all he's talking about here is just doing your build and getting the release out the door and doing all of the stuff that it takes to just get it running in production.
That you could get started with today and start running in your environments, to be that just like build an application using Tanzu Build Service and deploying, or doing some testing. And you could.
And then a lot of the complexity of cartographer and this kind of stuff comes from the extensibility of it, right? That it's not just a black box of doing things. It's a framework for building for doing whatever you like. I mean, you can think about in the Java world, something like Maven or whatever it is people use nowadays, right? Like there's a lot of abstractness and pluggability and stuff and all of these things, which is the point.
Build your own. You can build your own custom supply chains, and again, push them back to app accelerators or wherever feels right for your ops teams to iterate on, or and developers just specify, hey, like this is where I'm at, this is what I'm going to do, and let's rock and roll. So let's look at the pieces of what's in the supply chain, because there's quite a bit there. The first part being a source controller, which helps pull code from Git. Mm-hmm. Next could be, again, literally anything.
Now that's an important point, is unless I'm totally wrong, which, you know, that could go either way. The idea of a source controller doesn't mean that it's only Git, right? You could swap in however you want to access your source. I guess Perforce. I don't know what people use, but you could fit that in there. Maybe Plastic CM or whatever. But you could fit in what you wanted there. It's just most people would use Git nowadays.
Could say, hey, I want to do some custom whatever, that
custom whatever,
with
my
the
favorite
supply chain choreographer methodology. Great, go for it. Then we could use our tried and true Tanzu build service.
Dude, someone took the time to put a little card in
packs,
here,
which allows for easy operational management, base images.
My experience, no one ever uses those.
For developers to not have to be concerned with, how does my code become an OCI compliant image? Next, we hop right into convention service, which is quite cool in that it allows operators to specify conventions for certain application architectures to like inject certain things. So
once again, to de-jargonify, and I won't do the disclaimer that I'm not being a jerk here in my phrasing, but what he's saying is that this gives the opportunity for not developers, operations and security people, to enforce the configuration that they want, to even overwrite things that developers have, but to really to automate it and adding the policy that they want, right? The way that things are configured, or also just add in, like, you know, the actual production configuration instead of developers having to do it. But it's that kind of thinking and that kind of thing is where you get a lot of the governance benefits that I think didn't really exist as strongly previously until you started using something like that.
Like, for example, has a nice integration with application live view for Spring Boot apps, and that if like from the Tanzu build service, the convention service sees that, hey, that was a Spring Boot app that was built inside of the build service, it's able to automatically do all of the Kubernetes configuration to hook up your Spring Boot app to application live view, which absent that would be a ton of code and work for a development team to wire up. And as an operator, you don't want that sprawl in your environment. Next, we look at a really big and really important section, which is the supply chain security tools, where we do things like scanning, signing, and storing. In the scan section, it's kind of what you would imagine. It runs scans and has policies to allow to say, hey, like I found criticals in my underlying image, like don't deploy. When we move to the sign phase, this is
I realize
we
you
start to
can't
really get
exactly
to the
read all
heart of
this
some
stuff
of the
'cause
more
I can't.
hard and challenging parts of the secure supply chain, in my opinion, around if I sign my code throughout the iterations, like how can I know that changes weren't made? And if a malicious attacker were to come in and change my code, I don't want that to be deployed if my signatures have been corrupted, for example. And lastly, storing.
So that's a great example of like some extremely critical, very important, but I think to most application developers, really boring and tedious work that needs to be done, right? Let alone, and then you also don't, it's probably also a bad idea, given that context, to have your application developers do that, because they're probably going to be inconsistent in how they do it on each team. And even if you give them kind of like explicit instructions and policy that they then have to go do on their own, just errors are going to happen, right? So centralizing that is a huge way that you get a lot of the governance and security benefits of doing cloud native stuff. Again, this is some great learning that we had from the Cloud Foundry world that we had with the Tanzu application service, where you see a similar thing available just because it does all of this for you.
Like once we've actually like said, hey, there's like vulnerabilities. You don't want them just disappearing into the ether. You want to be able to query them or maybe render them for your security teams, whatever feels appropriate for your org. Whew, I don't think we're going fast enough. I'm just kidding. Let's keep going though. We are going quick. And lastly, we end with the actual deployment, which is typically done with our cloud native runtimes, which can simply be summarized as saying really creating a friendly developer abstraction for doing application deployments, turning what can be
I added the music in.
like a few tens, you pick the number amount of YAML,
Let me turn that down,
to
Matt.
just like a single definition file that can be 15, 20 lines long, and handles things like scaling and stuff like that. So we can see here the power of Supply Chain Choreographer and the parts within it that are all under the Tanzu Application Platform umbrella. Pick and choose what works for you, and customize to fit your org's needs. Lastly, we look at what, in my opinion, is one of the coolest parts of this entire
what's it going to be?
Tanzu Application Platform, which is the run section. And like when running, operators are like, hey, I want to provide enterprise services. I've spent all this time hardening, database deployments and et cetera. I don't want teams just doing willy-nilly whatever they want. I want to be able to offer standardized like services to my org. So at runtime, they're not trying to do some crazy business. Well, first of all, we have
Some
to understand
crazy
that
business.
we've
I
built
like that.
everything here on the service bindings for Kate's open source project that we help manage, which is built on the service binding spec. And it just allows for this notion of simply connecting to, simply and in a standardized way, connecting to services. It can get complicated quick, but really can think about this as a simple way to connect to applications and in a standard way. So operators don't have to worry about what kind of crazy process teams are using to share secrets and make
I don't really know what he's
connections.
talking about here.
And then on top of that, we see the really cool services toolkit.
I mean, I know
which
he's talking about something,
allows
but I'm
for
not familiar
operators
with
to
it.
have that standardized experience of creating like services, be that on a cluster with other application teams or off cluster or on other clouds. It doesn't really matter so far as they can talk to each other somehow.
All right, so that's just in production hooking up to the services that you have. He's got RabbitMQ and Hadoop there, and I think this is where, I mean, Knative stuff, it would be part of this, and as our friends over at TriggerMesh do, it would be one type of service and one way of brokering services. In the Cloud Foundry world, this is, I think, called a service broker, and I think maybe that's even like the open thing he's talking about. But yeah, I mean, so that's what you would want to do as the operations people or an SRE person, whatever you want to call it, is have a lot of control over what services you're hooking up to, how you load balance and scale to them, and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, back in development, in your inner loop, you're going to need some mocked out dummy services as well to interact with, I think. But like I said, I'm not as familiar as this part as other things.
It creates that experience for developers to just say, hey, I want to use RabbitMQ 7 over there. And that's it. Like RA can be picked up. Same thing for P1. You just pick up those and connect to those services using the services toolkit versus having to do, a bunch of bespoke configuration or just spinning up your own services locally. So,
I mean, it sounds like it's a similar, probably a bunch of YAML files, similar thing of like, once you name something, it allows you to swap out what's actually underneath the name. And it allows you to reconfigure. I mean, it's just simple, like not simple, but conceptually, just we got to map to the right database or the right service that we have in production.
Enterprise scale there. And frankly, that is it. We doubled the time of our desired lightning talk, but I think we got to where we wanted to go. So any questions, please don't hesitate to hit me up. Anything you think I might have messed up, also please don't hesitate to hit me up. And thanks again.
Don't hit him.
Talk soon.
You could just talk to him. All right. Now, there we go. That's the next one I want to see, the beta 3. Let's jump to it.
familiar with the beta 2 release, please go back and watch that because you'll be pretty.
Okay. There we go. That's what I got distracted by.
My name's Alex. Today I
Hi,
want to talk
Alex.
to you about the Tanzu Application Platform Beta 3 release. And we're going to start right where we left off last time with the Beta 2 release. So if you haven't watched that video or you're not familiar with the Beta 2 release, please go back and watch that because you'll be pretty confused watching this one without having seen that. Overall, the problem space hasn't changed at all for the Tanzu Application Platform. Let's go ahead and zoom out.
Yeah.
On our new diagram, I've annotated all the new features with purple stars. So we're going to just speak to those. Let's start all the way on the left-hand side with the problem that we didn't speak to last time that we really should have. And that is, as an operator, before I even get started with the Tanzu Application Platform, how do I install and configure it? Well, turns out
This is the old, to use the funny phrase, who installs the installer?
that's not always an easy thing to do. And in this release, the Tanzu Application Platform team introduces the concept of profiles, which hopefully facilitate what boil down to single line installation paths for various user journeys, be that a full journey that I want all of the Tanzu Application Platform, or maybe I only want a small portion of that. We're excited to see what people do with this, and we're very glad that the car.
See, we watched that profile bit, and this is where I get confused, is I think this is where I really don't like the nature of like the tool chain that you use to build and run applications for Kubernetes. You also run in Kubernetes. I just like, that bugs me out. It makes it hard for me to think about things. But I think that's basically what he's going here, is like a developer has a cluster they've been provided. And the first thing they need to do is to set that cluster up. And to do that, so that they can start working with it, they put the Tanzu Application Platform in it. Or in some cluster. And then you have a profile that's basically like, this type of developer or this type of thing you're working on. It sets up the Tanzu Application Platform with all the services and templates that you need for that, which I guess could be fine. You could segment that out by group, sort of domain that they're working on. Like this is the front end retail banking group. You could even do it by large application suite, right? Like again, let's go to an online banking application. It's actually an online banking application has lots of sub applications. Your ledger, your transfers, your secure messaging application, going to sign up for another, as they call it, product there. So there's a lot of sub applications there. Maybe you could set up a platform profile that was sort of like, for this suite, this has all the stuff in that area. It would definitely set up that discoverability, that catalog of like all the different services, maybe even a microservice that you're relying on there. Or I don't know, maybe not.
Team has enabled this journey for our teams to really deliver this outcome to operators. Let's look now at the Learning Center, which is a new feature that's added in support of the flow of the problem that people experience around how do I actually implement best practices or teach my teams to do the right things.
You know, no matter how much you try and kind of like dislike the previous way of organizing developer knowledge, you always come back to the same core concepts, whether you're doing, what was it, the rational rows process, the RUP process, whether you're doing ITEL, whether you're doing ITSM, or you're doing SOA, you always come out with these same basic concepts. And the hope is that every time we completely reinvent them, we're just incrementally getting them better and less confusing. And you know, one thing you have to do when you're reinventing the universe, as we do, is I think it's really important to understand why the previous one started to calcify and be more harmful than helpful. Which I don't think we're at that point in the whole Kubernetes cloud world. It's totally fine. But at some point, maybe in the next 2 years, we're going to have to start to go through, you know, basically, I guess you would go through RUP, probably Enterprise Java, and you could have a sidebar on like, you know, some of the later things of doing it, but then also ITEL, and start to ask like, if you read the intentions of those, they're all fantastic, right? None of those processes is ever like, our intention is to completely grind to a halt all innovation and development and make it very difficult to actually do anything useful around here. I'm pretty sure that's not in the charter of any of those things. But it'd be good to start going through as this overall community and figure out, all right, if we were establishing a way of operating, how do we make sure we don't, it doesn't become a barrier like every single other process that has previously existed has. So at least we can get some more years out of it before we have to reinvent it again.
in my organization.
Oh, and I only say that because, having a knowledge, I forget what they call it in those other things, but, having your knowledge base or having the place you're documenting how things work. I think a learning center is a better way of looking at it because it's not a monolithic knowledge base that's like the truth. It's more of just a way to train yourself and come up to speed on how to use things, which, I don't know, that's an interesting take on it.
The Learning Center is a customizable training portal for really any cloud native training that you can do it both in real time or ad hoc as people want. Out of the box, the Learning Center comes with a meta training that teaches you how to write a training. So hopefully operators will be able to get started right away, or developers, really whoever wants.
That was just because, as I've been saying, the layers upon layers of fractal stuff, just like my brain starts to melt after a while. It is good to have who trains the trainers.
Write trainings and can start making these for their organization to get up and running and start teaching best practices. Let's go ahead and zoom way out again and make our way over to the supply chain flow, where we see more new features having been added.
I mean, back on sparkling or gas water. I mean, I feel like, if you had just like, you were out back and, you're back in the hill country in Texas, and you're trying to dig some fence post holes, and you got to get out the big rock breaking bar to break through the limestone, and you're really hot. Like, I mean, are you going to want some mineral water to drink? You're going to want just like still water, because mineral water is like, it's not refreshing. It's a whole different type of experience.
As a part of this release, we see that there's a new out-of-the-box supply chain added, and I love these out-of-the-box supply chains. The new one includes scanning, so it builds upon the testing and the general out-of-the-box supply chain that does delivery, but this one implements some of the scanning features that we haven't had a whole lot of time to talk about yet in our supply chain security tools. I'm really excited to see these grow and see people put these default supply chains to use. As we look down, we see that there's actually
So what is out-of-the-box supply chain testing and scanning? There are additional guides on how to create supply chains using more of the... All right, so just more scanning.
New convention that's been added to our supply chains as well. The Spring Boot convention is a new convention that people can use, which does introspection of really the flow. Because remember, the magic of conventions is they are supposed to be unknown to developers and apply configuration or changes really behind the scenes to allow, the supply chain.
I would suggest that, and this goes back to sort of what I was saying earlier, is ignorance is not the way to think about this. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but like, it's not so much that you don't want your developers to not know about what's going on or to be ignorant of it. It's that you don't want them to have to deal with it or really touch it, right? In the same way that, like, I don't care about this with cars, but it's a good analogy of like, developers want to know how the engine works and what it does, but they don't want to have to like do anything with it, right? Like it's not part of their deal. I mean, to be less metaphoric, like if a developer is using a database or whatever place to store their stuff, it's like they want to know how it works, right? Like you can kind of roughly know how a relational database works or a queue system or whatever the kids do nowadays. But like you don't really go and mess with it. It's fine to just be wise, to be knowledgeable about it. So like ignorance and like unknowability, I think kind of like muddles things up a little bit. And then, I don't know. That's just my personal thing. I've never really liked that way of like talking about abstraction layers.
To make.
But I know other people do, so whatever.
The appropriate configuration or things to get the app up and running in a targeted way. So in the case of the Spring Boot conventions, it's looking for things like, hey, I see you're a Spring Boot app. I should expose you at this port. Or hey, like you actually have a dependency on a MySQL connector. I should go ahead and annotate that. So in the future, other parts of our supply chain can look for those default.
See, and this whole deal here, this is a lot of where the coolness of the stuff comes in. If we were a certain other type of marketing people maybe 2 years ago, I'm sure we would try to call this AI something, AI CICD or something, right? Which that would have been fun.
Annotations and apply changes based on them. Last but absolutely certainly not least is the Tanzu Application Platform GUI. Depending on your purview of the world, you'll be more or less excited about this, but I'm really excited because I think it's a really important part of our customer journey that we have a visual representation of what's going on within the Tanzu application platform. In this initial release, there are two key features supported, and that is the application live view flow and our cloud native runtime like workload deployment flow, as we see over here on the right. Those are both exposed via plugin in the Tanzu Application Platform GUI. There's additionally a tech docs section where technical documentation can be added to the Tanzu Application Platform GUI as somewhat of a single pane of glass for developers or operators to see what's going on in the environment. And honestly, that's it. There are a number of other features and enhancements that have been done under the covers. We're not going to talk through all.
Oh, we're about to get a delivery, I think. So the dog's gonna bark her head off. But you can tell it's the holidays time of year when the DHL delivery people are having to rent additional vans to staff up to deliver things. Oh, there we go. Yeah, bark, bark, bark. Obviously, she doesn't have confidence that the doorbell notifies of things.
Those today, but I'm really excited for the work that the team's doing here, and I'm so excited
let's see what the card
people
is.
do and learn from how people put this to use. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
All right. Well, I think that kind of brings us up to date pretty well. Now, I want to go over, if you want to get started with it, I'll put the link here, but like if you're interested in that, you can go to tanzu.vmware.com/application platform. Real humdinger of a URL there. But, this page isn't incredibly detailed, but you can see where you can go to the docs and kind of dig into more. Now, I was kind of going to go over what's in beta 4 here, but first, we need Alex to do a video because he covers that stuff really well. But you can also just download it and start to mess around with it, which, seems fun. So let's put, I have the URL in there. Let me put it in the chat in case you're watching this. And it'll also be linked down below. But so let's look at beta 4 real quick. I'm gonna do a terrible job at telling you what's in this because I've read it a few times and I don't quite. I guess maybe I understand what's going on here. I'm just trying to figure out if it's like big or not. So one, I think, where is it? Let's get the release notes. So new features, installation profiles. I thought that was in. Oh, okay. So you remember the profiles are like the template for setting up an instance of this for developers. I think so. There's some profiles in there. I think I have the profile notion wrong, or maybe not. And then dev profile never includes. Okay, sounds good. See, it's kind of minor things. And then added in more scanning. Perfect. There's something else that was in here in our internal emailing that seemed more. There's also some telemetry collection. I don't think that's included here, but I think it's gathering information. It's the when you use a beta, you can share information about what you're doing to help the development of it. But I guess you can turn that off. Yeah, level disabled. Release notes here. Okay, well, I think that's probably good enough. And I don't know. This has turned into, how long have we been going here? Boy, I hope we've been recording. Yep. It's turned into Coté's end-of-year omnibus of the Tanzu Application Platform. I think I've developed some ideas here pretty well, and I think it's good stuff. Well, as always, if you want to find the archives of this show, first of all, if you watch this far, for anything that I've mentioned, I'll put it in the show notes down below. But if you want to see archives, if you go to tanzutalk.com, you can click on videos there, and there's a link to a playlist. This is a fantastic talk that I recorded here. But you can see the coming up on 2 years here, a year and a half. Still pretty amazing. Like all the videos we've been doing, things like that. And let me find that. I think if you really have watched all of this, it's worth your time to also go watch this if you haven't. So let me put this here. This is even more information about what's going on and kind of a look into what Backstage is, which, like a lot of these things, is a little obtuse just to read the documentation. You need some nuance and explanation for it. So this is the Tanzu Tuesdays. And you can go check out what that is. Well, anyhow, I think this might be the last one that I make this year since I'm going to be taking the rest of the year off. And, next year I'm looking forward to doing a lot more things like this now that we've got a whole new part. We've added this great new part of our portfolio into the Tanzu land. Frankly, doing just pure meatware digital transformation stuff is getting boring is the wrong word, but I think I've got that kind of settled out. So I need to spend a lot more time focusing on slightly more technical things, which I think would be fun and also overall beneficial. And then there'll be 2 problems that I can talk about, so to speak. Well, with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.